Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Strong and Sassy live on Joy 99.7 FM. I'm Noella Kharyne Yalley, and of course, I'm sitting in for your regular queen, Inimwa Inim Ado. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Samke J. Ngcobo. I hope I got that right. Now, Dr. Ngcobo is a remarkable individual who wears many hats, okay? She is a medical doctor, an author, a passionate mental health advocate. She is the founder and chief executive of Vocal Mentality. Later on in the show, we're going to be talking more about this organization. Now, diagnosed with bipolar disorder, type 1 actually, I beg your pardon, at the tender age of 14. She has not only navigated her way through the challenges of this condition, but has also risen to become a medical professional and a beacon of hope for many others out there. Now, today we'll be delving into her inspiring journey, discussing her experiences living with bipolar disorder and how she has managed, to carve out a successful and impactful career for herself. And so, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. Samke J. Ngcobo.
Thank you so much, Noella. It's so wonderful to be here, and hello to everybody in Ghana.
Right. Oh, but you're very beautiful.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So once again, you're welcome to Ghana as well.
Yes.
Is this your first time?
Yes.
Oh.
And first of many times.
Oh, I see. First of many times.
Yes.
So you've been here before?
No, I've never been here before, but this is the first, and I'm going to come back.
Oh,
and
okay.
Come back and come back.
But prior to you coming to Ghana, what were some of the tales you heard about Ghana?
Oh, no, I've just known that it has a rich history and heritage.
Right.
So that's what I've been looking forward to experiencing. And
Right.
I was today at Kwame
Nkrumah.
Yes.
It's Kwame Nkrumah.
Yes, in Nkrumah. So,
Right.
and it was wonderful to be there.
Okay.
And it's living up and
Every
exceeding the
expectation.
of it.
Awesome.
It's
How
a
about
beautiful
foods?
country.
Have you tried
Delicious.
any?
Yes, I tried the jollof rice.
Okay.
I love the seafood that you have here. I mean, it's on
Awesome.
the coast, so
Awesome.
I haven't been as adventurous as I can be. So
I see.
In terms of the food, but I'm definitely.
I mean, you never
intending
know. Maybe I'd give you a treat to something later on.
Okay.
You never know. But yeah, once again, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks also for honoring our invitation. Now let's get straight into business and talk about bipolar disorder. For someone who's listening and probably does not know about this condition, what is bipolar disorder and what are the types, that differentiates them?
Bipolar disorder is a type of mental illness. Previously, it used to be categorized as a type of a mood disorder. So it used to be made to be as part of the depression family. But over time, it's been found that it exists in something called a spectrum. So between what would depression be and what would schizophrenia be, somewhere in between the spectrum of that. And what makes it different to other mental illnesses is the presence of mania.
Okay.
Mania is an expansive, irritable, grandiose mood. And there are also symptoms that need to be satisfied in order to say that somebody has bipolar disorder. So flight of ideas, increased thought speed, racing thoughts, goal-directed activities. So there's a number of symptoms that one presents with, and engaging in high-risk behavior such as overspending could be one of them, high-risk sexual behavior, it could be gambling, and one has to deviate from their normal way of functioning. So it impairs your daily life. So one can say, how I could have bipolar disorder. I have done all these things. Why am I not necessarily having bipolar disorder? But the reality is that the things that you do have to hinder your social, occupational functioning, and that is when one can call it a disorder. And that is why it's so important for it to be diagnosed by a professional instead of us looking at the internet and then saying that we have a condition.
Okay. So, I mean, you have lived it. So talk me through your experience. I mean, you were diagnosed at 14.
Yes.
So what were some of the symptoms? What were you exhibiting? What did you notice with yourself that was different?
So I was diagnosed with mental illness at the age of 14 years old.
Okay.
I could not have possibly diagnosed myself at such a young age or have known that I'm behaving in a way that requires intervention in a hospital. So my behavior was escalating. So mood swings were changing, they were escalating in terms of severity. And I don't think anyone picked up because, I think people dismissed it as thinking that it's just a teenager and her moods are fluctuating because of that reason. And over time I started believing that the radio was communicating with me directly. I felt that the billboards were communicating with me. I started hearing voices as well and thought I was communicating with deceased loved ones as well.
Okay.
So when things became that much escalated and worse, that's when my parents thought there's something very wrong here. I was becoming very paranoid. I felt that my phone conversations were being recorded. And then my parents rushed me off to seek mental health care support. And that was the time that I was getting the intervention basically with my first presentation.
Okay. So your type is type 1.
I have type 1 bipolar disorder. So thank you for reminding me about that. There's differences in slight differences. There's type 1 bipolar disorder and type 2 bipolar disorder. Type 1, that both of them have the symptom of mania, but type 2 has something called hypomania, which is a less severe kind of mania. So there's also the duration of time whereby you could have these symptoms for a period of a week. These symptoms I described earlier on. And with type 2, they will exist for maybe 4 days. So any presentation in your lifetime of mania means you have bipolar. I could have it once in my lifetime, but if I present with manic symptoms, that means I have the diagnosis. So that's the difference between type 1 and type 2. In the past, people used to assume that bipolar type 2 is the less severe bipolar. So you have type 1, which is the baddie, and type 2 is just the less severe one. But the reality is that type 2 hinders your way of functioning in the world as well, the functionality that I spoke about, the impairment. So we can't say that type 2 is the less severe one. It may present in a different way, where many people will have more of the depressive symptoms more than they would have the manic symptoms, but they're not. One is not the less severe form of the other, basically.
Okay.
Yes.
So I mean, with a type 1, what's the most extreme symptom about it? And I'm building up the conversation. I'd get to where we're going, but I want to know, I mean, you've talked about how you used to get paranoid and think that your phone calls and all of that were tapped and all, but what is like the most severe with the symptoms?
Those symptoms can be very hindering in how you're functioning. So that's when you're complicating, because when you're having bipolar disorder, it's usually the mood fluctuations and you can the high risk behaviors that you can engage in. So the severity of those symptoms can vary from person to person. There's people who have never been admitted in the hospital because of the bipolar disorder, so they may
also
have a diagnosis.
symptoms are unique.
In severity wise, it can vary. So there's people who may never have been admitted to hospital even once in their lifetime. Then there's people you'll find that they're admitted several times. They will do disorganized things that they don't take responsibility for or they can't control at that time. So the presentation, the things I mentioned can come in varying severity, basically. Right. So one can overspend, one could end up in high-risk behavior. The fleeting thought, you can end up being in very dangerous situations because of those things. So the severity can vary, even though the presentation can be similar with the flight of ideas and so on.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I mean, here in Ghana, we have some notable personalities who have communicated that they have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and for some of the symptoms that they themselves have revealed to us, is it possible to have an experience or a manic experience where you get to share names of people you've been with sexually and stuff like that on social media?
It can happen. Social media can be the use of social media when you have a mental illness can be very problematic.
Okay.
So not everybody will do the same things, basically. So that's why I was speaking about the symptom cluster. So someone might not have certain symptoms or engage in certain behavior when they're unwell, but there's people who will end up doing certain things particularly when they are unwell. So those things are possible because it's the high risk behavior that I mentioned, and that particular person may be naming what how they behave, or how their symptoms of the bipolar disorder present. It doesn't mean that everybody will do that, but there's certain symptom criteria that has to be satisfied. So for example, what I mean is you could have 3 out of the 6 that you could present with, as an example, and that is what one would
Okay.
present with.
So take me through your experience, transitioning from a teenager to becoming an adult, developing from that stages, and the stigma around it, and how did it affect you growing up?
It did become quite a lonely place for me, especially with the initial diagnosis. People did not know what had happened to me. I've experienced different kinds of stigma along the way. From a cultural perspective, people thought I was bewitched. They'd say she's too intelligent, that someone has done something to her. And this is common in the African community, that we often dismiss it and from the cultural perspective. Then from a religious perspective, people thought I was demon possessed. I always narrate the story that I remember so distinctly, where I was exorcised in the hospital. So at that time, one may not know what exactly was happening, but I remember people coming from the church community coming to bring prayers, and they were laying hands on me, and you could see that the aggression was building up and the noise was building up in the ward. And it wasn't an ordinary prayer, because the ward was in a standstill after a while. And it's only in hindsight that I realized that they thought they were casting something out of me, because they believed I was demon possessed. Other people would call me the weakest link. I don't pray enough. The demon came because of me. They didn't know what to say. People did their best with what they knew how, and they explained it the way they best understood it to be. The worst form of stigma that I experienced was related to self-stigma.
Okay. You
I
judged
was
yourself
ashamed.
a lot.
I was ashamed. I didn't understand what was happening to me, so it was very difficult for me.
Right.
And it was very lonely as well, because I did not know what I had done to bring something like this upon myself. It's not like I had a reference points from a previous person in the family who behaved the way that I did. So I really internalized what was happening to me.
So in all of this, did you have any kind of support system?
Yes, I've through my life, I've had an excellent support system. My family has been incredible. It's been difficult for them, I have to be honest. My friends have been amazing. I've kept the same friends for long periods of time. Like, friends from preschool are still in my life. Friends from Sunday school, friends from high school are still my friends. And that's been a very important safety net, to have people who know me, the true essence of who I am, so that if I'm being irritable, one of my main symptoms oftentimes is related to irritability. I forgot to mention the irritability. So how do you know then, if I'm sitting with you right now and I'm being dismissive or rude towards you, you can't, a person who doesn't know me won't necessarily know that it is because she's unwell. They'll think I'm a rude person. So to have people who understand me when I'm functioning normally has been very important to me. My high school career was largely uneventful for the remaining time. So I was in grade 9 at the time, age 14. I continued with my schooling. I performed very well, obtained a bursary to get into medical school, and things were largely quiet initially, first year, second year, third year, and then by third year, I don't know if it was the pressures of life or life challenges along the way, but my illness came in the worst way. I was being admitted to hospital annually, twice a year, and it would be for about 2 weeks at a time. And oftentimes when you're admitted, say for a week or 2 weeks, you have to be booked off even after that to recover and bounce back, so to speak. You can't just be discharged today and return to functionality the next day. So
It's a gradual process.
It's a gradual process. So I really struggled in medical school because of my illness. I did not understand what was happening to me, and I also felt that people did not really explain the illness to me so that I could understand it for myself. So they thought that I was uncooperative in terms of taking my medication. I was just upset about the side effects, where the medication would make me gain about 30 kilograms in a small space of time. So it was a very antagonistic relationship between myself and the medication and the condition itself. So in my mind, intellectually, I acknowledged, I would tell people I have this condition, well, the close people in my life, but I didn't accept it fully. And I always tell people that it took me 16 years to finally accept my diagnosis. So I really only accepted that I have bipolar disorder and be able to talk as openly as I am now, well, and only more recently in the recent 5 years, just because openly as I do now, because I learned to befriend my condition instead of treating it as an enemy. And when I learned that, and also encountering the right care, comprehensive care and support from professionals as well, that's what helped me. And I
Right.
live a very normal, functional, amazing life with its
Awesome.
own challenges.
Right.
But for somebody that has a condition that has such a high level of stigma and judgment, I believe I'm doing well.
Awesome stuff. We'll talk more about the challenges. But there's something you mentioned. Does the symptoms ever make one get violent? Is it possible to get violent as one of, the symptoms of bipolar? One, the type 1.
Yes, you can, especially in a space or in a state where your emotions are not in control, because it's a chemical imbalance, and you require mood stabilizers and so on. Especially if you end up becoming a severity or a form, a mental state called psychosis. Psychosis is when you are having perceptual disturbances, you're losing touch with reality, basically. So you can end up doing things that are really quite harmful to
Right.
you, because of the fact that, or harmful to others as well, because of that emotional and mental state.
So for someone like, let's say, Chris Brown, who came out to say that he has bipolar disorder, and we all know the story about how he got violent with Rihanna, is it something that you can believe in, that probably was a symptom, a manic,
The challenge that I find as somebody living with mental illness is that obviously I don't know his life journey and his full
Right.
life story,
Right.
but I find that at times the condition ends up being used at times as an excuse, as an explanation.
Okay.
It's very easy for people to dismiss
and or take accountability for their actions.
avoid accountability. So I don't know what his medical file says, so I
Okay.
usually refrain from commenting about public figures in that sense, because I
Okay.
don't know what their life story is,
Okay.
unless obviously if they've said. But oftentimes as well, we often explain things to mental illness. Sometimes it's not. I'm not saying it is, I'm not saying it isn't, but I really would like to know what set of criteria have been fulfilled to
Right.
call it bipolar disorder or any other mental
That
illness.
makes sense. That makes sense. So what if you should meet someone, let's say you meet me for the first time, and you think that, okay, maybe Noella is someone I'd be having a friendship with for a while. Do you open up almost immediately that, hey, I have bipolar disorder? So how do you develop friendships, with
I
people?
like everybody else. I always say to people, when you meet someone, you're not just going to automatically say, hi, I have diabetes, hi, I have hypertension, hi, I have epilepsy. It's a gradual progression of a relationship.
Okay.
It's not a condition that you necessarily have to declare to people when there's no need.
Maybe just so they
psychological
know.
safety is an important thing.
Okay.
Like every other condition, like HIV, you don't have to declare openly to people immediately unless you're in a relationship with them, or whatever the setup is. So just like bipolar disorder, it's not a disclaimer that you have to declare. In building relationships, you build trust. Trust is an important thing. Confidentiality is an important thing. So it's not a disclaimer that one has to share.
Okay. And how have you managed it? I mean, is this something you still deal with at the moment? And how do you manage it?
It's a lifelong illness. It's something I face every day, in the sense that I take medication every day. I
Okay.
take medication twice a day. I take an injection every month for the condition. I see my psychiatrist
Right.
on a six weekly basis.
Okay.
I see my psychologist on a weekly basis for psychotherapy. So you can see that it's a multidisciplinary team intervention. It's not just a once-off thing where one is automatically being cured. Oftentimes people struggle with the idea of having to navigate this as a lifelong journey, but being realistic about what it is an important component. And if you start viewing it as not something that's a hindrance to your life, but as something that is a part of your life, it becomes less cumbersome.
Okay. Well, if you just joined us, you're still live on Joy 99.7 FM. It's Strong and Sassy, and we're having a conversation with Dr. Ngcobo. She's a South African who has battled or still battling with bipolar disorder, and basically she's been able to triumph through this difficulty. And so we are talking about, all the in-betweens about this condition, to help sensitize all of us about this condition. You can actually join us live on Facebook as well, to, share your thoughts and contributions. Also via our WhatsApp number, you can text us on 055 1111 997. That's 055 1111 997. All right, Dr. Ngcobo or Joan, you are a medical doctor.
Yes.
How did you decide to, do medicine? I mean, what was the inspiration?
My illness was
Okay.
my inspiration. I believe I always ask the question, I've asked the question to God to say, did I choose my illness, or did I choose to be a doctor, or did it choose me? The original dream was to be a teacher. I believe that I'm also teaching society in what I'm doing currently, in how I'm speaking. When I had my first episode, that's when I decided that I wanted to become a doctor. I had
Okay.
a curiosity about mental health. I think there was also a part of me within myself that was seeking answers, and I thought I'd find it within the textbooks of psychiatry to understand what happened to me, because I wasn't getting the answers that I want. So medicine became the option. I love people. I love engaging with people. I love helping people. But I always say that I have an advantage. I've had to sit on both sides of the consultation room, seeing people with my condition and also being someone with that condition. I believe that it's my double portion and my double blessing in that way. I don't look at it as a hindrance to me in that sense. I believe that I'm a better doctor because I have this condition, because I have a greater level of empathy and understanding. I'm a better patient because I know my rights. I know when I'm receiving good care. I know what mental health care users need. I'm very sensitive about terminologies, for example, to say so and so is suffering from bipolar disorder. I'm not suffering from bipolar disorder. I say I'm thriving despite it.
Right.
Terminology, or to say the bipolar person. There are no bipolar people. There are people living with bipolar disorder. One may say one is being very sensitive about that, but the language we use is very important. So I believe I have a very broadened understanding because I live with this condition, and I've been working in the Department of Psychiatry for over 5 years specifically in psychiatry, and I've taken that knowledge and I've brought it to the world, so to speak, in forming Vocal Mentality and other platforms that I've started.
And was it challenging, navigating life through medical school and dealing with, or thriving, in your words, through your condition?
Oh, that's a very important question, because I didn't just thrive overnight.
Right.
I'd be creating a very unrealistic story if I were to say that I just woke up and had this acceptance to my condition. Medical school was tough. My illness was tripping me in the worst way in many a time. Rotations in medical school are 6 weeks long. So if I'm booked off work for 2 weeks because I'm in hospital, then I have to return, then I have to recuperate at home for another week. That's already 3 weeks out of 6 weeks missing out on
And
the core
lectures and all.
teaching. So it was very difficult. I had to play catch up for a very long time. So I didn't have a very steady university life. Because of that, because I was always playing catch up. I was always trying to bounce back. I was always questioning so many things. I was hiding this thing, from other people. I felt ashamed. Rather, not to say I was hiding it, I was ashamed because the people around me knew. What helped is that I had incredible support from my professors in medical school. They really knew what was happening with me. So they really supported me, when they knew I was struggling, when they knew I had to be booked off work, that kind of school at the time, they understood. So it was, yes, it was tough having to catch up all the time, but I feel like they didn't ostracize me or mistreat me. I had a great level of understanding, but like I'm saying, it's been a varied experience along the way. It's not always that I've always had support all the time from people. I have experienced stigma even from professionals as well.
And you have I mean, an organization, mental.
Sisters for Mental Health.
Okay, Sisters for Mental Health. We're going to talk more about that particular one, but also there's a question I actually wanted to ask. I don't know why it's escaping me. But yeah, through your experiences as a medical doctor, I'm sure you've met, so many people with, conditions similar to yours and other ones. How fulfilling has it been, interacting with them and, them sharing their experiences with you and you helping them, thrive through that experiences as well?
As I was saying, that I believe that I'm a better doctor because of that, because I have a greater level of empathy and understanding. I don't have judgment towards my patient when they're struggling. For example, patients sometimes will relapse. Relapse meaning you get back to having the presentation of the illness because maybe you're not taking your medication properly, or you're having side effects, or the side effects are discouraging you from taking your treatment, or for whatever reason you have relapsed. So it's easy for people to say, but why don't you take your medication? Because you have the medication, now you're relapsing. If you were taking your medication, you'd be fine. I have a greater level of compassion and understanding to know the complexities of that journey. And having that understanding. Obviously, in a therapeutic space, I'm not always declaring to every patient in that therapeutic space in the room to say, oh, by the way, because that's their space. But, knowing the ethics, knowing the rights of patients, knowing that they need to be respected, those nuances are very important for me to be aware of, and I am aware of them, and have a greater sensitivity as a result.
So let's now talk about your organization. And obviously, I know you'd say that it was your condition that inspired you to probably come up with it. But aside that, what else inspired the creation of it?
I had a need and interest in community. Community meaning engaging about mental health in a socially interactive environment. So to engage, oftentimes people feel lonely. Oftentimes people find that they don't have a space where they can be safe to speak with other people. You don't have to discuss all your issues or your challenges, but just to be in an environment where, for example, we do hikes. And you meet other people in that sense. So it doesn't mean you have to talk mental health, you have to talk mental illness. So we'll have a hike, and then maybe there's a psychiatrist or a psychologist who's there to teach and educate and empower people. Because I realize that there's value in community and engaging in a socially interactive environment. If you were to write a poster saying, we're talking suicide on Saturday, I don't think you'll have a high turnout. But if you say to people, we're talking about struggles and challenges, that's common to all of us. People will have an interest because they want to have the support. So to say we're having a hike where we are talking about struggles, so we are engaging about that, or navigating difficult emotions, that's one of the topics we've had. And then sometimes we'll have seminars as well, where a psychiatrist will be there, a psychologist will be there, an occupational therapist will be there, and most importantly as well, someone with lived experience, someone who's thriving with their condition. I've seen people who are suicide survivors sharing their journey, and they form their own organizations and platforms. Someone who lives with bipolar disorder, and her mother lives with bipolar disorder as well, and talks about what it's been like, being raised by a mother who lives with this condition and has had many difficult situations related to their condition. So it's a very well-rounded communal thing. It's not just for mental illness, people with mental illness. It's for everybody who has an interest in mental health or wants to engage more about it. There are people who live with mental illness. There are people who are supporters of people with mental illness. There's people who want to have an understanding about this. So that was my inspiration. It was to create a safe, conducive environment to engage about these topics where it's non-threatening and not intimidating.
Is it gender biased, or it's open to all?
It's open to everybody. So the name is Sisters for Mental Health, not because it's for the sisters.
Okay.
So when it started very informally. It was a WhatsApp group. So I just thought the girls are going for a hike. So I just called it informally in that way, Sisters for Mental Health.
Okay.
And over time it's evolved, it's growing. I look forward to seeing what becomes of it. So that's the origins of the name or the thinking behind it. But it's definitely not to say mental health support for women, which is partly part of the reason why my personal platform is vocal mentality. Because I don't want people to only see me as somebody who discusses mental health only for women. That's
right.
definitely not how I brand myself or anything. I talk mental health for everybody. I am a woman, but when I talk this topic, it's for everybody.
Awesome stuff. And what has been some of your, memorable or success stories?
Oh, wow. I have had many of those lovely ones, but one of them, and I'm not just saying it because you're sitting across me or I'm in Ghana, but the current biggest highlight is having the impact of reaching people from other parts of the continent, reaching out because of my platform, and they'll reach out via that because they'll want me. I'm amazed at what my work has enabled me to achieve and do, and the places I get to visit, engage about mental health in other countries. That's not a small thing at all. So I'd say that is really one of the big highlights, is to realize that the commonality, the connection, you know, that is really something that's deeply humbling to me.
Awesome stuff. And I mean, based on your experience, thriving through the condition itself and meeting people as a medical doctor throughout the years, what is that one misconception or maybe two misconceptions about the condition that you would like to address?
What I would like to address is the behavior of somebody living with mental illness, particularly bipolar disorder, is not always them. There's a part where one does have to take accountability for the things that they do. Yes, in a state of being unwell, you can do things that are uncharacteristic. I'm not a loud person. I'm not an out of control person. I'm not an immoral person at all. I don't present with every symptom that's on the list. So it's very important for people to know that people with bipolar disorder aren't just these loud, people say these things oftentimes in the work environment. Oh, that one is a bipolar. That's a symptom of how one can present, but to not always diagnose people in a certain way and assume that that's how we are like all the time. It's not always that people with bipolar disorder are a certain way. We're not one and the same thing. And to overdiagnose is something that I always discourage. I always say that telling people that they have a condition when you're not their doctor, you're not going to diagnose someone with a heart condition. You may suspect that they may be unwell, but to diagnose people with mental illness just because you have a comment about them is not a fair thing to say.
Okay.
Yes.
And what are your thoughts on the state of, mental health care and, the support systems in our society? I mean, what are the most visible gaps you see?
I think it's very disappointing that oftentimes, and I don't think it's just something that's in my country only, I think overall, mental health is the most under-prioritized mental health discipline, I believe, amongst other ones. We have a challenge that infectious diseases are a challenge and they should be prioritized. But I think when it comes to the priority list, mental health falls far down when actually so many people, if it's the third most debilitating diagnosis out of the three, in the category of three, there's HIV as well. You would think that it will also be prioritized accordingly, but it's not. It's not legitimized as a normal condition. So not as a normal condition, but as a condition that requires enough attention. We shouldn't only focus mental health on Mental Health Awareness Day, Mental Health Awareness Month. We need to make it an ongoing conversation. And I think it's amazing. I mean, the Samke who's 14 would be smiling to see that mental health is not getting the attention that it is. We have a long way to go. But I think we really have come a long way. When I look at my time with my illness younger and where we are now, I think younger people stand a much better chance. They don't have to take 16 years to finally accept the diagnosis and condition. There's more resources made available.
And what would be your response to critics who may, question the ability of someone who lives with a condition and their ability to perform in, high stress, professions like medicine, like you did?
I'm living proof that it's not true. with the right support, in the right environment, if the condition is controlled, you can do and be anything. Professor Ofori Atta's mother was a pilot. She lived with the condition, and she was thriving with it. The melody is a monument, a beautiful monument. We are an ambassador for the melody, and it's proof that that is just stigma. It's stigma related. I'm a medical doctor who has worked in a specialist environment where we were admitting the 23 patients in a night. It's challenging, yes, but if the condition is stable, you can do and be anything. And I'm living proof of that.
You're still live on Joy 99.7 FM. It's Strong and Sassy. We're discussing bipolar disorder with Dr. Joan Samke Ngcobo.
It's okay. I forgive you.
I had to take my time. I had to take my time with that. But let's talk more on vocal mentality. What are some of the pushbacks or resistance you have experienced?
You know, I have been amazed at times when I was doing different platforms and radio interviews, the kind of questions that I'd be asked at times, which shows at times how misinformed people can be about it. So I'd say the pushback I've experienced is related to people's lack of understanding of the condition. So it's their internal processes. There's people who, within the medical field, I've had incredible support on the most part, you know, but not everybody. Not everybody has 100% scorecard where everyone is always supportive of you. So I think, you know, I also thought, have I committed career suicide to be open about my own journey?
Right.
What about people's misconceptions about my capabilities? What if people look at me a certain way? And I've seen some of the things that people will assume. Obviously, they're more cautious now because they find someone who's empowered and speaking, but it wasn't always like that from the beginning. There's people who will doubt your capabilities because of their own misconceptions and biases related to the diagnosis. So the pushback has been related to, say, I remember one of the interviews I did, somebody said, aren't people scared of you? And I said, but I'm not swinging on chandeliers in the consulting room, so why would they be afraid of me?
Right.
If my condition is not controlled, I'm in the hospital. Someone with a fracture is not going to drive with the fracture. We understand that. So if I'm unwell, I won't be in the work setting. But in the work setting, if I'm well, I'm functional like everybody else. So it's breaking the stigma, basically. I think the greatest pushback has been related to stigma.
So we have a question from one of our listeners. Says, good evening. Please, is there any relationship between depression and bipolar disorder? Can the same person experience depression and bipolar disorder? And that's from Nanaya Ayumensa.
Thank you for your question, Nanaya. Yes, there is a relationship between the two. Even when I mentioned earlier, or in the past as well, I'm talking about the psychiatry textbook, they used to be in the same category, meaning they used to be termed mood disorders. So it was deemed to be a type of mood disorder, but over time it's been found that it's not necessarily a type of mood disorder, it's a standalone. But bipolar disorder, and I'm putting it simply for the sake of understanding in a simple way without complicating it, is to say, when you say bi, think of it as two ends of the stick, the highs and the lows.
Okay.
So there's manic episodes, the ones I explained. Then there's depressive episodes, which you'll present with symptoms that of depression, basically. So that's how I can best explain it in a simple way.
Okay.
So there is a relationship.
Okay. Here's another one that says, that's from Isidra on Facebook, says, thank you for sharing your lived experience with us, Dr. Samke. As a person with lived experience with bipolar disorder too, your story is very empowering.
Oh, wow. That is so wonderful to know. Thank you so much, Essay.
I guess my last question to you would be, what is your opinion on the use of medication versus, holistic alternatives, treatment for managing bipolar disorder, and how do you balance these approaches in your own life?
Bipolar disorder is a chemical imbalance. And in it being a chemical imbalance, it requires mood stabilizers. If one experiences what I explained earlier, psychotic symptoms, you may require antipsychotics as well. But it's very important to be on medication. I don't know if I have the bias because I am a doctor as well, but I've seen the value of what is called pharmacotherapy, that medication plays an important role. But what I want to highlight is the fact that the management of bipolar disorder is that it's a multidisciplinary team approach. Multidisciplinary team, it's different aspects of management that play a role. We are multifaceted beings. We are mind, body, and soul. So I don't dismiss the importance of religion, for example. I would never say to someone, dismiss your religious beliefs and only stick to the one thing. If that is an important aspect of your life, it's very important, but not at the expense of your say needing the medication as well. So I take, for example, for me as on a personal journey, I take my medication twice a day. And once a month as well with the injectable I spoke about. I see my psychologist, that's psychotherapy. My religion is very important to me. I'm Christian. God plays a very important role, not to a state of being religious and grandiose and, a state of being unwell. So it's also at times, maybe as an example with the religion element, how then do you tell if one is being overly religious and unwell? My family can tell when I'm not stable enough and I'm presenting when it's now deviating from just normal prayer and normal functionality, and then it's becoming deviating from my normal. So it's just to say that our holistic well-being is important. Exercise is important. Eating well is important. Journaling is important. There's so many aspects that help in our well-being. I would really encourage people to explore things that are proven and tried and tested for their well-being.
So there's another question here from one of my friends. Says, how does she thrive through love relationships with the condition?
Like every other relationship. My relationships are, I don't have to declare to people about my condition. My friendships are healthy. When I meet people, if people see bipolar before they see Samke, then they're not worth being in my life. That is a problem. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk more on your advocacy work and vocal mentality. I've already asked you about your success stories. I think we've spoken about your challenges as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, what more do you do, and how can one be a part of your organization?
Yeah. So, vocal mentality came at a time when I had a public bipolar episode 4 years ago, just before COVID. That's when it happened, February 3, 2000. And the name vocal mentality means speaking up. It means having a mindset that is empowered as opposed to having one that is oppressed. So I started my personal platform. It's a website, vocalmentality.com. And there's also my Instagram handle as well, where I speak about mental health. I usually do interviews, I do talks in corporate environments and in schools as well. I'm very passionate, particularly about the high scholars. Because it's the time at which I was diagnosed and didn't have the support that I would have liked to have and see. So I love speaking at schools. I speak in wellness campaigns and corporates as well. So vocal mentality is where I share, I share the work that I do. I share my personal journey, and I also collaborate with other organizations related to mental health. So I'm partnering currently with one of the organizations back home to see how we can find each other with the work they do and the work I do. I believe there's no need to create or reinvent the wheel. So it's to see how can I bring something that is Samke into the space, and how can they be of support to me as opposed to doing the same thing over and over. So vocal mentality is really my pride and joy. My company is 4 years old, still learning, growing. There's different aspects to it. So the platform itself, I explain who I am, what I do, and I also treat it as a blog as well, where I share different interviews I've done and conversations I've had as well. Yes.
So let's say I'm somebody who lives with a condition, but I'm in Ghana. I mean, your company is based in South Africa. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I want to be a part of your organization. Is it possible?
Yes, I mean, I'm open to collaboration and engagement with other people. My view or dream is to have a global reach. So I am from South Africa, but engaging with, I mean, the way I met Professor Ofori Atsa, we met in South Africa, but here I am in Ghana as an example to show that I developed a stronger passion for Africa. And knowing the challenges that are faced and the commonalities of those struggles related to mental health. So the sky is the limit. Well, actually, it's not the limit. You know, I met her at a conference. She told me she wants me to visit her country. I'm here in Ghana. So it's not a limitation, basically.
So, what would be your vision, your biggest vision for the space you're in? Mental health, bipolar disorder. What's that big vision that you would want to one day realize or would want to see happen?
In this lifetime, I would like for mental illness and mental health overall, not just bipolar disorder, to be respected like every other medical condition. I don't want it to be recognized separately. I want it for it to not be ridiculed. So in this lifetime, I hope that mental health starts getting the respect and recognition and validation